Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars news update. When George Lucas created Star Wars, he understood that Han Solo's character is kind of central to some of the storytelling and mythology from this galaxy, using archetypal story tropes. For example, across canon and Star Wars Legends continuity, he's been the anti-hero who lacks traditional heroic qualities, the scoundrel with a heart of gold. He embodies the charming rogue rebel, and despite his at times rough exterior and questionable morality, he reveals a more compassionate and honourable side as the story progresses. It's why I keep pushing that Han Solo needs to appear at some stage in the Mandalorian shows. There is a long period of time between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens where Han Solo has some pretty interesting adventures. His wisecracking and quick-witted character is so underrated, and even though we say this about characters such as Boba Fett and Din Djarin, he does bring to the table a very cowboy gunslinger aesthetic. And Alden Ehrenreich as a young Han Solo in 2018 I think did a pretty good job. The character will always be synonymous with Harrison Ford, but Alden was great too. I think I've been rewatching the original trilogy more than any other Star Wars in recent weeks and months. No matter what Disney puts out, we always have George Lucas's original films. And out of the classic trio, we often put so much focus on Luke and Leia, but when you put him under the microscope and examine him, you find that Han Solo is a remarkably cleverly crafted character. His charisma and the way he exudes a sense of coolness that resonated with audiences back in 1977 and still to this day. Some people just write him off as the edgy bad boy scoundrel, but he is so much more, and I think it boils down to his relatable flaws. Despite his bravado, he's reckless, he's impulsive, more often driven by self-interest, but he looks out for those he loves. And even in those moments where his more unlikable attributes are on display, he is not one-dimensional. You end up with a very human character, and Star Wars just wouldn't be the same without him. His relationships are complex, and that's why I really love in The Force Awakens in episode 7, the first time he sees Leia after all these years. They've both been dealing with this guilt of their son turning to the dark side. It's pushed them apart. I thought that was some of the best acting, and no matter where he appears, he brings a narrative importance. He's daring, he's a perfect addition to some darker missions, especially in video game form. And so what I say is that whether they use the deepfake algorithm, or they decide to use Alden Ehrenreich again, they give us more adventures with Chewie and Han in the years following episode 6. And today we do have an update concerning Alden Ehrenreich and if he's gonna return. He's recently opened up about his experiences in the galaxy far, far away. A few months ago, a rumour surfaced that Han Solo would be playing a small role in Dave Filoni's Star Wars movie, and that Alden Ehrenreich would be reprising the role as young Han, as he did in 2018's Solo: A Star Wars Story. Given how the Mandoverse has given us Luke, 3PO, R5, R2, and references to Leia Organa, this would not surprise me in the slightest. In fact, I would expect it for Dave's film. Here's the thing about Alden, and don't worry, I am going somewhere with this, it does connect to today's topic. Back in 2022, Kathleen Kennedy spoke against recasting, kind of saying how Solo was a mistake and a learning experience for Lucasfilm, so she might not be too keen to have him back. On top of this, it doesn't sound as though Alden is too keen to return either. Having said all of this, there are 2 upcoming Star Wars projects that I don't see how they're going to avoid him. The first one is the Lando movie, originally planned to be a Disney Plus series by Justin Simeon. It's now being adapted by the Glover brothers for a big screen release. And the other project, as aforementioned, is the future of the Mandoverse, the movie, but also future seasons of other shows. As the Mandoverse moves along, I think it becomes nearly impossible to avoid a character like Han Solo, if we're going to see more of Boba Fett's story and more of the smuggler's underworld. So how does this fit into today's news? Well, in a brand new interview with Vanity Fair, Alden Ehrenreich, after a very successful 2023, has reflected on his life after Solo. Alden is back with a vengeance this year, starring in 3 feature films including the near billion-dollar hit Oppenheimer, and now more than ever before, Ehrenreich is comfortable discussing how the process of Solo affected his early years in Hollywood, and you're gonna find it's not too surprising what he says. While preparing to play a prequelized Han Solo in the biggest film of his life, Alden came across an interview from the late 70s with Harrison Ford, following the release of the original Star Wars: A New Hope. Ford was asked what it felt like to come off such a massive cultural hit, and responded with relief that he didn't feel much. Ehrenreich could relate. He says, quote, "We all live under this mythology that success in a certain way is salvational and changes everything," the Solo star says now over Zoom. The actual back end of success or failure ends up revealing itself to be not nearly as meaningful as you think on the front end. I've had that experience so many times. A movie comes out and you want to go like yes, and you just don't. Ehrenreich thinks back to that Ford interview after I asked him a similar kind of question. In terms of his own career, 2023 has been major, and not just because it's the first year in which he's appeared in a film since 2018, when Solo flopped at the box office. He says, quote, "It didn't feel nearly as real, but it's been a bumpy road of highs and lows, and that is very, very hard to navigate." He almost regrets his first big success being Star Wars. He feels as though other filmmakers did not take him as seriously. Here's the quote, "I love the original spirit of how they wanted to make Solo, and I did it because it was this great platform from which I could do my own thing. But what I realized at that point is I hadn't built my own thing enough to be able to do it. I knew that I didn't know myself in that way yet. And that takes a certain amount of time and effort and failure in its own kind of enclosed way. That's what I spend that time doing." He continues by stating, "When you go back and want to do something, you realize that there's other people on the list who have surpassed you, and you have to fight harder for a particular role that you want. I've lived that over and over again. There's a practical arithmetic as an actor now that frankly, I just don't have the stomach for in the long run. I don't want to do projects on the cut. I don't want to do things I don't really love if I can avoid it. And with the cadence now, you kind of have to be doing a certain amount of projects. There are things that I really wanted but that I didn't get. The heartbreaker is when the director goes, 'You're who I want, but I can't cast you because they need to have this guy who came off this thing.'" So I think the biggest takeaway in regards to what we spoke about at the start of the video is that Ehrenreich considers his time on Star Wars to be both a curse and a blessing. He's encountered major setbacks over the past few years, something of a trend with Star Wars actors, and I'm getting a similar impression and vibe as some of those early interviews that Daisy really did after The Rise of Skywalker. And in the same way, Daisy had setbacks after Star Wars and is now coming back to it. We might see a similar thing with Alden. If Lucasfilm wants him, given the ups and downs he's gone through, he might find it's a good financial and career move. But after the failure of Solo at the box office, are they going to have him back? Well, I think the answer is yes, but not for a Solo 2. They're not going to take that gamble again. Originally, he did sign up for 3 Star Wars movies, but now that he's started to see success in things like Oppenheimer, he might just decide to plow forward doing his own thing. No rearview mirror, no looking back, and he's done with Star Wars. I don't know how this is going to go. He refused to answer one way or another. Very interesting stuff. Share your thoughts on what we spoke about in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, my dear friends, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you, always.